Hey guys, tonight we ride straight into a world where bronze flashes in the sunlight, where longbows hum like cicadas, and where the clash of hooves against dry earth is your morning alarm clock. Your breath fogs in the cool dawn air of the steppe, and your fingers tighten around a leather bridle as the low chant of war drums stirs the sleeping horses. Somewhere behind you, a horn calls out one long, curling note. That means form up. Today, you are an Amazon, and today, the world is not ready for you. You brush dust from your greaves and shift your weight. Saddle sore already. The tent you've just left is simple felted wool, ringed with dried herbs to keep away insects and ill omens. Inside, someone was sharpening an obsidian knife while humming a song that may or may not be about disembowelment. It's hard to tell with the language. Outside, the sky stretches like polished steel, and there's that same tense stillness that always precedes a decision that will get someone very gloriously stabbed. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world you're all drifting off from. Now, dim the lights. You maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You mount up, and the weight of your short recurve bow shifts on your back. It's carved from horn and sinew, deadly at impossible distances. A quiver hangs at your hip, fletched arrows tucked like secrets against your side. Your war mare deep-chested, narrow-legged, smarter than some kings, snorts once and begins to move. You ride with a column of 50. All women, all armed, no chatter, no hesitation, just breath and hoofbeat. You are headed to the river crossing, where rumor says a Greek trading party trespassed last week and left behind 3 burned tents and a missing scout. Not that they'll live long enough to feel guilty. This isn't the mythic version of the Amazons. Not yet. Not the painted vase where women in miniskirts and fancy boots duel tidy heroes under marble columns. No, this is the real deal. Dust-choked lungs. 3-day rides. Sleep when you can. And a scar under your left arm from when a wild dog decided to test fate. Your sisters ride with you, and none of them smile. You reach the crossing, just past midday. A lone goat wanders near the bank. You don't see the Greeks, but the air smells. Wrong. Bitter smoke. Oiled metal. You dismount. Arrow, already knocked, and stalk toward a tree line. What you find makes your stomach twist, not because it's gory, but because it's insulting. 3 of your fallen sisters, laid out like trophies. Boots stolen. Coins left on their chests. A message, but a foolish one. You bury them with salt and song, marking the graves with bone carvings. One of the older warriors, gray braids tight to her skull, whispers an oath under her breath. We ride for Antiope. You repeat it. They all do. This wasn't just a skirmish. This was a provocation. Back at camp that evening, the council gathers. You sit cross-legged near the fire, chewing on dried meat and watching the flames play on bronze armor. Antiope tall, scarred, with a jaw like it was carved from flint stands at the center. She's already in her war cloak. She says nothing for a long time, just stares into the darkness beyond the fire. Finally, she speaks. We cross the river tomorrow. We take the pass. And then we remind the Greeks what fear tastes like. No one objects. You all know the route through Thrace, down into Attica, past temples, past cities, right into the heart of the world that thinks it's safe behind marble and myth. You dream that night of owls and fire, the old signs. You wake just before dawn, saddle your mare, and pack your rations tight. The air is cold, your fingers stiff, but your bowstring hums like it's dreaming of vengeance. You don't speak. None of you do. You just ride. Now, to be clear, historians still argue whether any of this really happened. Were the Amazons real? Were they just poetic metaphors? Did Greek writers invent an entire nation of horsewomen to justify their anxieties about powerful women with sharp objects? Possibly. But let's not let a little scholarly uncertainty stop us. Because something or someone kept showing up in records, art, and battlefield reports for centuries. And it sure wasn't a metaphor that left arrowheads lodged in Athenian skulls. You pass through a border village by midday. It's already been evacuated. That's the effect you have. You find a single basket of figs left on a doorstep, untouched. One of your sisters scoffs, but pockets them anyway. Spoils, she mutters. You move on. That night, you camp in the hills. Below you, the lights of a Greek city flicker like fireflies. You watch them with narrowed eyes, chewing on a route that tastes like sadness. Tomorrow, you ride down, not to raid, not this time. This time, you send a message, one carved in fear and ash. But still, there's more to it. The Amazons aren't just vengeance machines on horseback. Around the fire, you hear laughter. Someone's weaving a garland from cedar. Someone else is painting a new tattoo on her arm, 3 stars and a river. You remember that these women are poets, too. Storytellers, diplomats, queens. There's even a healer in the group who scolds everyone for eating too fast. She once cured a king's infected toe and made him promise not to start another war. He broke the promise. She sent him a scorpion in a jar. So when you ride toward Greece, it's not just bloodlust. It's justice. It's a reminder. It's history knocking very, very loudly. Tomorrow, the battle drums start again. And the myths, the ones the Greeks love to tell. They haven't heard your version yet. You wake with your cheek pressed to a saddlebag. The smell of leather, sweat, and crushed sage wrapped around you like a cloak. The sun hasn't risen yet, but the camp is already humming, the soft murmur of armor being laced, horses snorting steam into the morning air, the clink of flint stones coaxing reluctant fires to life. Somewhere close, someone is singing low, rhythmic, a chant in the old language that only the eldest warriors still speak fluently. You rub the sleep from your eyes and sit up, just in time to see Antiope herself stride past. She doesn't walk. She glides like a blade across ice. Her hair is braided down her back. Her armor lacquered in blood-red resin that gleams like beetle shell. On her hip, her sword short, slightly curved, perfectly balanced for slicing in motion. She nods at you once, and somehow that nod contains a full sentence. Today, you matter. You mount your horse, but it's not time to ride just yet. Instead, you're summoned to the central circle, where the fire has been stoked high, casting flickering shadows across a dozen fierce faces. This isn't a war meeting. This is a story circle. Because today, you don't just ride, you remember. And to remember, you must first listen. The name they chant isn't new. Hippolyta, the queen before Antiope. Sister, legend. She led the Amazons when the world was wider, and the maps had more dragons than cities. You lean in as an older warrior, named Thalestris, begins her tale. Her voice is smoke and gravel. The kind of tone that can hush children and shame generals. Hippolyta wore no crown. She says, she wore a belt of power, gifted by Ares, god of war. Or maybe it was taken. Depends who's telling it. The warriors chuckle softly. You lean closer. They say Hippolyta was tall, even by Amazon standards, with arms like olive trunks and a gaze that could pierce bronze. She ruled from Themyscira, the Amazon capital on the Thermodon River, a city of walls painted with sky symbols and towers, shaped like long arrowheads. No men lived within its gates. Visitors came by appointment and left either impressed or limping. Under Hippolyta. The Amazons built alliances with Scythians, traded with Persian caravans, and were said to have maps so detailed they could ride by starlight alone. She brought peace. Thalestris says, by reminding the world what it cost to break it. But peace never lasts long. Does it? Especially not when a demigod gets curious. Enter Heracles, muscled nuisance and patron saint of doing too much. He came for the belt. Of course, the girdle of Hippolyta, one of his famous labors. Now, here's where things get murky. Some say she offered it to him willingly. Others say he tricked her. Some claim he attacked the city and was repelled, tail between legs. Historians still argue whether this was a hostile raid, a diplomatic negotiation, or a lover's quarrel that got wildly out of hand. What's clear is this: Heracles didn't leave with grace. He left with blood on his hands and the first real crack in the peace Hippolyta had built. In the years that followed, the Greeks would spin countless versions of the tale. Some turned Hippolyta into a soft-hearted queen overcome by male charm. Others made her a violent villain, brought low by noble Hellenic muscle. But here, in this circle, the truth feels closer. She was a ruler, a warrior, and a sister betrayed. You sip thick tea brewed with pine and mint, trying to keep up with the flood of names. Penthesilea, who would one day die at Troy. Otrera, the mother of them all, who supposedly carved the first Amazon laws on the walls of a cave with her own blood. The legends blur, but the thread stays strong. Women forged in fire and gallop, shaped by choice, not fate. And now, Antiope, you've been beside her for weeks. Watched her map raids in the dirt, with bits of bone and carved shell. Seen her break up fights with a single glance. She has Hippolyta's clarity, but none of her mercy. Where Hippolyta tried diplomacy, Antiope plant Siege. You once saw her take down 2 Thracian scouts in one movement bow. Draw. Release. Reload. No roar. No boast. Just motion, like music. She keeps a locket hidden in her armor. No one speaks of it. But everyone knows it contains a portrait of her sister. Whether it's Hippolyta or Penthesilea is debated. Either way, you don't ask. The fire burns lower now. The sun has fully risen. It's time. You and your sisters mount up and ride through the mists. Past the banners painted with horse-headed birds and sun-eyed wolves. Antiope rides at the front. her cloak billowing like a storm. You pass young initiates running alongside, barefooted, sweating, chanting their vows between gasps. One stumbles. A warrior lifts her up, murmurs something, and sends her back down the hill. She'll return, or she won't. But no one is left behind for shame. As the column stretches across the plains, you remember your own trial, the initiation of arrows, where you had to ride blindfolded through a forest, guided only by the whistle of feathers and the beat of drums. You still have the scar on your thigh from when you forgot to duck. But you made it, and now you ride with queens. The march continues for hours, and you're lulled into a half-dream by the rhythm of hooves and wind. In that daze, you begin to imagine the Greeks waiting on the other side of the hills. Marble cities. Yes, but also confusion. How could a land ruled by gods be so surprised by women with bows? You're told that in Athens, little girls are taught to fear the night because of Amazon raids. That mothers whisper your name when daughters misbehave. That somewhere in a temple, there's a statue of you. Well, someone who looks vaguely like you, trampled under the foot of a victorious Theseus. You hope it gives them comfort, because soon, the real version will be knocking on the gates. That night, camp settles into a kind of sacred stillness. No fires, just cold rations and shared silence. Antiope walks among the ranks, placing her hand on each warrior's shoulder. You try to sleep, but your heart thrums like a war drum. You wonder if Hippolyta would have done it this way. Would she have waited? Would she have sent envoys? Or would she ride beside you now? Sword drawn, belt of power glowing faintly in the moonlight. Tomorrow, the edge of Greece. Tomorrow, the stories rewrite themselves. You cross the river at dawn, hooves splashing through cold water that smells like iron and moss. The fog is thick, curling around your legs like ghosts, looking for a second chance. Your mare hesitates for a moment, just a flick of the ears, but you nudge her forward with a soft click. Behind you, the column stretches long and quiet. Riders arranged in perfect lines. Banners rolled tight to avoid announcing your presence too soon. There is no need for songs or horns. Not yet. Beyond the far bank, the world changes. The soft grasses of the steppe give way to rougher ground, stone-studded and veined with thorny brush. Trees lean closer here, and you find yourself ducking branches that look like they haven't seen sunlight since the last ice age. This is Thrace, ancient land of warriors, Vophs, and women who don't flinch when they bleed. The air feels older, like it's been holding its breath for centuries, and you're here to remind it to exhale. By midday, you stop to water the horses near a ruined shrine. Time and moss have claimed it, but you can still make out the carving of a lion devouring a stag. Someone whispers it was once sacred to Bendis, the Thracian huntress goddess, one of the few deities who doesn't blink at women in armor. You leave an offering, a carved arrowhead, and a smear of honey from your pouch. The ground seems to sigh. Just a little, you gather with the others, while Antiope traces lines in the dirt. 3 days to the pass. She murmurs, 5 to Athens if we push. Her voice is low but sharp. Her eyes are already there. Beyond the mountains. Beyond the city gates. Beyond even the myths waiting to be rewritten. You wonder if she sleeps at all? Or if her dreams are just maps. Someone pulls you aside that evening. Her name is Callisto, scout and storyteller, which makes her half useful and half dangerous. She passes you a piece of smoked goat and begins telling you about the old times, not just Hippolyta's reign, but before that, before Themyscira, before there were even Amazons, as you understand them, they say. She begins. We come from fire. You raise an eyebrow. Chewing. She shrugs. Not literal fire. Revolution. Exile. Women who walked away from villages that told them their voices were too loud and their hands too calloused. She leans closer. We weren't born in one place. We were forged across dozens. This is the hidden story, the true origin of the Amazons. Or at least the closest anyone dares whisper. Not one city. But many camps. Not one queen. But countless leaders. A confederation of bands that roamed the Black Sea region, from the Caucasus to the Danube, carving out territory, one hoofprint at a time. Historians still argue whether they were a unified nation, a loose alliance of Scythian tribes, or just the Greeks' terrified overreaction to women who could aim properly, but their presence shows up everywhere in tombs, in weapon caches, in those familiar graves with female skeletons buried beside spears. You remember passing one of those burial sites as a child. A small hill, grass burned away by wind, with a ring of stones marking the edge. You were told not to touch. Naturally, you touched. Inside, they said, were the bones of a chiefess who once rode for 7 days with a broken leg just to deliver a message. You swore that night you'd ride farther. You ride into the hills as night falls, and the wind picks up sharp and sudden. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howls. Another answers. The sound isn't frightening. It's familiar. You tie your horse and help pitch tents, then join the others around a small fire, shielded by rock. Someone roasts chestnuts over the flame, and the smell reminds you of festival nights back home. Though no one here would admit to being sentimental. You pull out a bit of beeswax and oil your bow. The wood gleams under your fingers, and you feel the slight warmth from its use earlier in the day. Not much talking tonight. Everyone's focused. There's something about these mountains steep, cold, and covered in ancient watchtowers, half swallowed by ivy. You're entering lands older than your language, where the ghosts don't whisper so much as listen. They're curious now. The path narrows by morning. Horses have to go single file. Every few yards, you spot carved stones tucked into the rock. Symbols etched deep spirals. Zons, wolves with eyes like stars. They're pre-Greek, pre-Amazon. Even, you think about the people who walked here barefoot, centuries ago, scratching their stories into the cliffs with nothing but bone tools and pure stubbornness. By midday, the pass opens slightly. You dismount and scramble up a rocky outcrop for a better view, and then you see it a glimmer in the distance. Not the sea. Not yet. But the Athenian roads, far below. Greek patrols march in rows like rows of wheat. Their shields gleam. Their helmets catch the sun like blind eyes. They have no idea what's coming. You descend, adrenaline sharp, and report to Antiope. She nods once. Good, she says. Let them polish their armor. Let them practice their perfect formations. They'll shatter just the same. Later, Callisto slips beside you and says, You know what the Greeks fear most. You shake your head. Not death. Not even defeat. They fear shame. Being beaten by women, that'll haunt their grandsons. You try to laugh, but it comes out dry. That night, no fire, just whispers and cold meat. You lie beside your horse, curled in a wool cloak, and stare up at a sky so bright with stars, it feels like the gods spilled something. You wonder which stars watched Otrera's first march, which ones guided Hippolyta's last ride. You wonder what the bards will say of you. If they say anything at all, probably not the truth. They'll say you were wild, that you burned cities for sport, that you hated men, wore armor made of snake skins, breastless, beastly. They always exaggerate. You shift onto your side. Bones, aching. No one ever says you were tired, that you missed your dog, that your feet were blistered and you were still learning to braid one-handed, that you cried when your first arrow hit a deer clean through. But here, with your sisters beside you and the road to Greece finally beneath your boots, it doesn't matter. The truth lives in your bow, in your calloused hands, in the slow inhale before the charge. Tomorrow, the first outposts. Tomorrow, the Amazons descend from legend into history. You wake to the sound of water dripping off pine branches, the mist thick and clinging to your hair like wet silk. Your cloak smells like smoke and damp wool, and your limbs ache from sleeping curled on uneven stone. But your ears are sharp. There's a hush in the air, the kind that only settles when something sacred or dangerous is near. The scouts returned an hour ago, with news a passable route around the Greek border fortress has been found, and beyond it lies something unexpected. A hidden grove, a fire pit long cold, trampled earth, and symbols, your symbols etched into the bark of the trees. You saddle your mare, hands moving by instinct. The rest of the warriors are already assembling, their faces unreadable in the half-light. You ride out in tight formation, following the path the scouts marked in stones and broken twigs. It's not far, just half a league through the wet underbrush. But when you reach the grove, it feels like stepping into a breath you didn't know you were holding. The trees form a circle here, tall and wide-limbed, their trunks scarred with spirals and flames, etched deeply with stone knives. Beneath them lies an altar, nothing ornate, just a slab of reddish stone covered in moss. Someone once burned herbs here. You kneel and recognize the faint scent of cedar, yarrow, and dried rose petals. An offering site, ritual space. Antiope steps into the clearing last, her eyes scanning the markings, like she's reading a letter from an old friend. She doesn't smile. This was theirs. She says, "Before Themyscira, before we had walls, you're witnessing the rites of the old Amazon ways, the ones the Greeks never saw, and the poets never understood, the ones whispered about by the oldest warriors, the ones with hands like cracked leather and a 1,000-yard stare that never softens. These rituals aren't decorative. They're not ceremony for ceremony's sake. They're function. They bind. They sharpen. They transform." As the rest of the column arrives, a small group begins preparing the initiation circle. You're not surprised. One of the younger riders, just 15 summers. All elbows and fire is being brought forward. Her name is Lysandra, and she has asked to shed her training braid and claim her warrior's name. You've seen her ride. She's fierce, impatient, once threw a spear through a snake just because it startled her. Now, she stands barefoot on the stone, eyes locked on the horizon. The circle is drawn in ash and red earth. Vines are braided with bones and wound around the trunks. Each sister steps forward and lays something at Lysandra's feet, a coin, a feather, a shard of obsidian, gifts, challenges, memories. You place a flint arrowhead, your first successful shot. She nods. Solem. The ceremony begins. One elder chants the old words, syllables, thick and growling, barely recognizable to your ear. Lysandra is stripped of her belt and markings. She is painted in clay and sweat, then handed a bow, not to shoot, to carry. She must walk a spiral path through the trees, barefoot and silent, followed by 2 warriors who whisper truths behind her every mistake she's made, every failure, every fear. Not to shame her, to test her resolve, and when she returns, trembling but unbroken, Antiope steps forward and names her Tisiphone, named after one of the Furies. The warriors clap once, then fall silent. A sister is born. You help stoke the central fire for the second half of the rite, the binding. Each warrior traces a sigil on Tisiphone's forearm with powdered charcoal. The sigils vary stars, wings, suns, blades, but each one holds meaning. Yours is a stag's hoof swiftness in retreat and impact in charge. When she has been marked by all, she kneels, and Antiope ties a thin red cord around her wrist, bound not by blood, she says, but by will. The fire crackles. The cord tightens. The grove listens. Later, you ask an older warrior, Aella, how long these rituals have been practiced. She spits a plum pit into the grass and says, since we stopped hiding, maybe longer. You press her for more. She shrugs. Before Themyscira, we were bands, nomads. Some say we were priestesses. Others say mercenaries. Some say we were born from ash, when the first village threw its daughters to the wolves. Historians still argue whether Amazon rituals were inherited from Scythian burial practices, adapted from Thracian shamanism, or entirely invented. But the truth is, they don't need to be proven. They just need to work. And they do. That night, a celebration. Quiet, but intense. Dried meat. Roasted nuts. A bit of honeyed wine smuggled from a previous raid. Tisiphone dances by the fire. Her movements sharp and rhythmic. Like wind slicing through branches. You join in. Moving with the beat of the drums, goat hide stretched tight. The rhythm, older than any alphabet. Someone starts a call and response chant. Half mocking, half reverent. Aella throws in a limerick about a Thracian general who fell in love with his own helmet. The laughter feels warm in your ribs. Before sleep, you lie beneath the trees, watching the smoke from the fire spiral upward. You think about your own initiation. You remember the pain. Yes, but also the pride. The moment your name was spoken with weight, the moment you stopped riding in someone's shadow and started casting your own. The Greeks know nothing of this. They imagine you as strange invaders, exotic and monstrous. They paint you topless on pottery and whisper about barbarian rites. They don't know about the tears, about the oath-sworn sisters buried side by side in hills no map has named, about the braided bracelets tucked into saddlebags for luck, about the campfires where queens sit cross-legged beside novices, trading riddles and scars. You drift into sleep with your fingers curled around your belt. The sky above is wide and unblinking. Somewhere in the dark, the grove breathes. The old rites are safe. For now, tomorrow, the first Athenian outpost. Tomorrow, your arrows fly with memory behind them. You wake before dawn with your fingers clenched around your dagger, and your heartbeat thudding in time with the distant hoot of an owl. The fire is low, the embers pulsing red beneath the ash, and the sky overhead is a bruise-colored tapestry of stars beginning to retreat. You sit up slowly, stiff from sleep, and feel the quiet hush of the camp. Horses nicker softly, someone sharpening a blade near the edge of the clearing, and off to your left. Laughter low, intimate, definitely not authorized by Antiope. You glance toward the source and spot two warriors curled together under the same cloak. One of them, Mira, is still braiding the other's hair with tiny blue glass beads. You're not surprised. The Amazons don't have many rules about romance. But they do have expectations, be honest. To be brave. And don't get distracted mid-battle. As for marriage, that's a foreign idea. Better suited to Greek wine-soaked epics or dithering city-states among Amazons. Partnership is fluid, sometimes fleeting, and always a matter of choice. The war horn hasn't sounded yet, so you sneak off to the creek to wash your face. The water's ice-cold, biting your fingers as you splash it up. You catch your reflection in the shallows, a face roughened by sun and wind. A scar down your jaw from a training accident involving a boar and too much ambition. You like that scar now? It makes your smirk look more serious. On the way back, you pass the healer's tent, where a warrior named Alara is already grinding herbs into a dark green paste. She nods at you without stopping, muttering to herself in two languages. Ilara is one of the few who chose to stay behind the front lines, not because she lacks the skill to fight, but because she can set a broken rib in 12 minutes flat. You once saw her stitch a gash while arguing about river routes with a cartographer. She didn't look up once. Inside the tent are the wounded, mostly minor injuries from the mountain pass. Twisted ankles, arrow scratches, a spectacularly bad fall into a thorn bush. You recognize one of the younger girls, her wrist wrapped in linen, eyes glassy with pain. Ilara waves you over. Hold her arm, she says. And you do. The girl winces, but doesn't cry. She earns a red thread bracelet for bravery. By midday, Antiope calls a full camp meeting. You stand shoulder to shoulder with 50 warriors beneath a pine canopy. Light streaking through the branches like golden spears. She begins by describing the layout of the first Greek outpost, a small stone fort along the river bend. Lightly guarded. Recently reinforced. Nothing you can't handle. Then, to your surprise, she shifts tone. Before we ride, she says, we honor those who came before. She gestures toward a set of painted wooden tokens laid out in a semicircle at her feet. Each bears a name: Otrera, Leucippe, Melanippe, Penthesilea, queens, generals, legends. The tokens are an old tradition, each carved by hand and blessed in a spring near Themyscira. When one is placed on the battlefield, it means this isn't just a raid. It's a statement, a banner with no cloth. You each touch the token of your choosing, whispering a name or a wish. Yours is Melanippe, the strategist, the one who once defeated a Persian regiment by flooding their tents with stolen bees. You mutter, help me not get stuck in a thorn bush again, and step back. Then, finally, the question you've been dreading. One of the newer warriors, all freckled cheeks and nervous energy, blurts out, what about men. Silence. Antiope's face remains perfectly unreadable. Then she speaks. We don't hate men, she says. We just don't rely on them. She gestures toward the camp. We have sons, brothers, lovers. We fought beside them, buried them, raised them. Her voice sharpens. But this, what we're building, this is ours. You glance around the circle and realize just how complex the Amazon world is beneath its warrior exterior. Some women raise children here. Some leave them with allied tribes. Some choose never to bear any. You've heard of Amazons who married Scythian traders for political alliances, and others who took lovers on campaigns, only to ride off without a word the next morning. There are no hard lines, only choice. Aella, the older warrior who never misses a chance to mock you, chuckles. I had a husband once. Hands like marble. Head like cabbage. Lasted 2 winters. Another chimes in. Mine cried when I beat him at dice. I liked him more after that. You laugh with them, and the tension lifts. The truth is, Amazon society isn't anti-man. It's just indifferent to the pedestal. Love is welcome, but only if it fits the rhythm of the rider. As the sun lowers, you begin preparing for the night patrol. You ride with Callisto, who has recently adopted a wild falcon that perches on her saddle horn and glares at everything. She tells you stories again, some real, some suspiciously embellished, about Amazons who settled in remote villages, raised daughters who could fire from horseback at age 6, and only revealed their heritage when challenged by arrogant generals. Historians still argue whether our legends are just Greek fears in a fancy dress, she says, stroking the falcon. But we know better. That evening, back at camp, there's a rare bit of quiet. Someone strums a lyre. Someone else hums a lullaby that might be Thracian. Tisiphone, the newly initiated warrior, is sitting by herself, tracing sigils into the dirt with a stick. You walk over and sit beside her. Do you ever think about stopping? She asks. You consider it the soft life, a cottage, maybe goats. No, you say, but I think about what I'd defend if I did. She nods. That's enough. You lie down in your tent later. The stars once again spilling across the fabric overhead. The breeze smells like wet pine and ash. You think of the people you've known, the ones who rode away and never returned. The ones who did and never spoke of what they saw. You wonder if the Greeks have anything like this. Probably not. Probably too busy inventing democracy and yelling at their sons to memorize Homer. You smile and roll over. Tomorrow. The outpost. Tomorrow. Athens begins to feel the edge of your shadow. The outpost appears like a stubbed toe on the landscape, awkward, under-defended, and unaware that it's about to be the warm-up act for something much, much larger. You crouch on a ridge above it. Sun, at your back, fingers curled around the shaft of your favorite arrow. It's the one you keep oiled and sharpened like a secret. The one you whisper to before big moments. The one that always flies truest when you need to make someone regret their career choices. Below, the Greek camp looks laughably relaxed. A few sentries pace in predictable loops. 2 of them are actively arguing, gesturing toward a tipped-over amphora. Their commander, a pudgy man with a too clean helmet, is busy frowning at a map and not noticing that death, in the form of 50 highly trained women on horseback, is currently perched 100 yards away and watching him like a hawk, you glance toward Antiope. She raises one hand. Fingerspiel. The signal. You inhale once. Deep. Cool. Focused. Then you notch the arrow and let it fly. It whistles down like judgment. The first guard doesn't even have time to gasp before it lands cleanly in the gap between his breastplate and shoulder. He crumples silently. The second doesn't fare much better. In the span of 3 heartbeats, the outpost erupts in chaos. You're already moving, riding hard down the slope. Ove pounding. Cloak whipping behind you like a banner. The rest of the Amazons descend with the fury of a thunderstorm that's been doing push-ups. Spears rise. Swords flash. You spot Callisto swinging low, yanking a soldier off his horse with a looped rope and laughing like it's a holiday. This isn't a battle. It's a message. We are here. And we are faster than your prayers. Within 10 minutes, it's over. The survivors drop their weapons and fall to their knees. Some crying. Some cursing. You gather them in the center of the courtyard and let Antiope speak. You weren't our goal, she says. You were a door. We're opening it. She doesn't kill them. That's the part that startles even you. She has the commander kneel and removes his helmet, revealing a sweat-drenched face that has absolutely no poker skills. You'll tell Athens we're coming, she says. And if you lie, we'll find you. He nods so fast, it's almost impressive. By midday, you've stripped the outpost of food, medical supplies, a small stash of olive oil, and a rather fetching set of sandals that Tisiphone insists on claiming. You leave the captives bound, but unharmed, surrounded by arrows planted upright in the ground, each marked with the sigils of Amazon clans. A warning. A calling card. Take your pick. You ride on in a loose column, now heavier with loot and light with victory. The mood is high. Someone starts singing an old war chant about a baker's daughter who poisoned an army with honey cakes. The chorus is surprisingly catchy. You hum along. That night, you camp near a stream, using stolen Greek linen for bedrolls. You find yourself beside Illyra, who's cleaning her blade with the same meticulousness she uses to dress wounds. She glances at you. That shot you made, she says. First blood. You nod, not quite sure if it was pride or just reflex. Maybe both. Do you ever feel it? She asks. The moment they stop seeing us as myth, you think for a moment. Then, I think they never believed it in the first place. Not really. And that's what makes it easier for us. She smiles. Then let's keep surprising them. You stretch out on your side, gazing up at a sky smeared with stars. Tomorrow you'll reach the borderlands of Attica. Real Greek soil. Close enough to Athens for their horses to smell you. You wonder if the city knows what's coming. You remember the stories the bards told back home. How the Greeks defeated giants. How they outwitted monsters. How they tamed wild lands with reason and order and clean togas. You always found it suspicious that none of their stories ever ended with. And then they got their butts kicked by a group of extremely competent women with superior cavalry skills. Back at the stream, Tisiphone is trying to catch a fish with her bare hands, while Callisto offers unhelpful advice. Someone is braiding ivy into a crown for the horse that kicked the most men during the raid. You drift between laughter and memory. Your body sore. Your spirit restless. The edges of the fire glow like coals waiting to become something more. And then you remember a story whispered by an elder once that the Amazons crossed the Black Sea, not because they were running from something, but because they were chasing a dream. Not just survival, not just revenge, but a new world. One not ruled by men, with polished speeches and slippery alliances. A world where power didn't mean domination, but balance. Historians still argue whether such a world was ever possible, whether the Amazons truly sought to conquer or simply to carve space for themselves in a world determined to erase them. But, lying there in the dark, surrounded by sisters who just took down a Greek military post before lunch, you start to believe the dream was real. You close your eyes and let your breath match the rhythm of the wind in the grass. The outpost is behind you. The cities lie ahead. You don't ride tomorrow to become a legend. You ride because you already are one. You ride at dawn beneath a sky streaked in lavender and smoke. The hooves of your mare beat steady rhythms into the Greek soil. The dust rising in thin gold clouds that catch in your throat and cling to your lashes. This is Attica now, real Greek territory. The outer bones of the empire, where farmers glance nervously over their shoulders and shepherds pray to stone gods they've never actually seen. You pass olive groves and crooked stone walls. Tiny hamlets that shut their shutters before your shadow can fall across the threshold. You don't burn anything. Not today. That's the point. Let them see you. Let them worry. Behind you, your sisters ride in tight formation. Banners unfurled at last. The air smells like pine and challenge. Antiope's quiet as ever. Riding ahead, like her thoughts are iron filings pulled toward a magnet no one else can sense. Every now and then she taps her fingers against her saddle horn. A rhythm she once told you helps her remember where she's headed when the past starts shouting too loudly. You pause at a high ridge just before midday, below a valley settlement, clearly unfortified, with terracotta roofs and sheep too slow to understand history. Antiope raises her hand, and scouts ride ahead. They return quickly with reports: no soldiers, only frightened old men, some children, and a very confused goose. You descend not to destroy, but to speak. Yes, diplomacy. Amazon style. You ride into the village square, as villagers scurry behind doors. One brave elder steps out with a walking stick and a jaw that says he's seen worse than 50 armed women on horseback. Antiope dismounts first. Her sword sheathed, but visible. She doesn't bark or posture. Instead, she holds out a pouch filled with grain and a ring of dried figs. She sets them gently at the elder's feet and says in Greek, "We do not kill those who do not resist." The elder stares, then glances at you. His eyes are pale and skeptical. You nod once, calm, steady, the kind of nod that says we could, but we won't. He says nothing, but he bows slightly. The message is received. By sunset, you've passed through 3 more villages, each time repeating the ritual approach. Observe. Offer. The last one is near a ruined watchtower, and an old woman brings out a basket of soft cheese. She places it carefully on the ground and mutters, "You're not like they said." You smile. Neither are you. You ride on, bellies full of stolen cheese and growing confidence. Callisto tells you the Greeks are probably panicking by now, drawing up strategies and counting arrows. What do you think they'll do? Tisiphone asks. Callisto shrugs. Write another play about us. Probably. One, where we fall in love and die nobly, so their egos survive the ending. You laugh, but part of you wonders if she's right. That night, you camp in a thicket outside a marble quarry. The air smells of limestone and salt. and you can hear the distant crash of waves from the Aegean coast. You lie on your back, tracing constellations. Though the Greek names don't come easily, you prefer the Amazon ones. That crooked line of stars near Orion, you call it the shield that shattered. The cluster near Taurus sisters reunited. You remember stories whispered around the fire about how Amazon queens would be buried beneath trees whose roots twisted around their bones, and how their spirits would rise as owls or wolves, depending on how many battles they won. You wonder what kind of animal you'll become. Hopefully something with claws and a taste for Greek arrogance. You rise before dawn and scout ahead with Ayala. The land begins to change again. Fewer farms. More villas. You pass marble columns crumbling under ivy. Statues whose faces have been weathered to blankness. In one ruined estate, you find a faded mosaic depicting a man wrestling a lion. Callisto snorts and says, "They always make it look like they're winning." You stop beside a dried-up fountain and examine an inscription carved into the stone base. It's a dedication to Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, and the patron of the city you're about to reach. Ayla mutters. She's about to meet some real warriors. You camp that night on a hill overlooking Athens itself. There it is. Finally, white marble glowing in the distance, like it thinks it's better than you. The Acropolis looms above it all. A crown of temples and columns. As arrogant as a firstborn child, you study the walls, the gates, the narrow streets twisting inward like a maze, made to confuse invaders and comfort poets. But you're not confused. You're furious. Because down there, beneath those columns, they wrote stories about you. Stories where you're the villain, where you're monstrous, or seductive, or defeated. Stories where Antiope is captured and tamed like some wild horse, where Hippolyta dies for love, where your arrows miss, and your horses stumble, and your legacy ends with a shrug and a marriage proposal. You don't plan to burn Athens to the ground. You plan to make it remember. That night, you gather with the others by a cooking fire, eating flatbread and figs. Someone starts a chant from Themyscira. Slow and rhythmic. You all join in. A chorus of voices rising through the dark, echoing down the hill. You know the Athenians will hear it. That's the point. Ilara passes around carved charms, tiny wooden tokens shaped like hawks and blades, to keep you fast and lucky. She says, you take one shaped like a crescent moon and tuck it into your pouch. Sleep comes late. Your dreams are restless battles under moonlight. Columns falling. Voices chanting your name. You wake once in the middle of the night to find Antiope standing watch alone, her eyes fixed on the glowing city below. You walk to her side. They think they know us. She says quietly, they don't even know themselves. You nod. They will. She glances at you. Ready, you draw your dagger and hold it to the sky. Let's go rewrite their plays. Tomorrow, the siege begins. You ride at the head of the column now, not because you asked, but because Antiope pointed to you just after dawn and said, you lead us in. No room for doubt. No time for flinching. You just swallowed the nerves like sour wine, nodded once, and mounted your horse with that quiet terror buzzing under your skin, the kind that says something very old is watching. The walls of Athens rise in the distance, white stone streaked gray where centuries of wind and rain have kissed it. Olive trees dot the hills, like forgotten sentries. The sun has climbed high, but the gates remain closed. No messengers. No banners. No trumpet fanfare. Just silence. You know they're watching. You ride closer, scanning the terrain. Athens is clever. Not just proud, its natural defenses are sharp. Rocky cliffs to the west, narrow passes from the east, and a clever use of elevation that makes charging straight in a fool's errand. Good thing you've never been especially good at straight lines. You halt at the edge of visibility far enough to seem diplomatic, close enough to make their hearts race. Antiope rides up beside you. She says nothing, just watches. The city pulses with a strange stillness, like a held breath waiting for either a kiss or a scream. Then, from the parapets, a figure appears, clad in polished armor, cloak flapping like a flag, a lion embossed on the shield Theseus. You don't need an introduction. You've heard his name sung by the Greeks and spat by your sisters. The stories vary wildly. Some say he kidnapped Antiope. Others say she fell in love with him and defected. One version insists he seduced her with poetry and figs. Another says she willingly betrayed her sisters and took up residence in the Acropolis as a kind of royal ornament. Historians still argue whether Antiope was a traitor, a victim, or a tactical genius. You glance sideways at her now. She's looking straight at him, her face unreadable. Not anger, not fondness, not quite. Something colder, a reckoning. He raises a hand, not in greeting, more like a royal wave. Antiope doesn't return it. Instead, she signals the horn-bearer. The call rises long, low, impossible to misinterpret. Not a declaration of war, just a promise we are here. That night, the siege begins in full. You're assigned to a unit, guarding the southern flank. Where the terrain dips into ravines and thick scrub, you help construct barricades using stolen timbers and thorned brush. Then string tripwire traps using horsehair and fishhooks. It's exhausting work, but the rhythm settles your nerves. You sleep in a foxhole, half buried in dry earth. Your bow cradled like a pillow. Dreams come sharp and strange. Theseus with a mirror face. Antiope dancing on the Parthenon roof. The gods playing dice with your name. You wake before dawn with dirt in your teeth and resolve in your chest. By day 3, the Athenians have begun to respond. Their scouts probe your outer defenses, and you counter by staging a midnight raid on a supply depot. Callisto returns at dawn with a bag of bread, 3 spears, and a reluctant goat that becomes the unofficial camp mascot. Tisiphone names it Heracles, which somehow makes everyone feel better. You start hearing the drums by day 5. Greek war drums are different, slower, heavier, less rhythm, more intimidation. You reply with your own, a fast staccato beat taught to you during initiation, meant to mimic hoofbeats and heartbeat combined. The hills echo with competing tempos. Then, one afternoon, a Greek envoy approaches, alone, unarmed, waving a white cloth tied to a broken spear. You meet him at the edge of the field. He's young, too clean, trembling. Athens offers truce. He says, voice high and brittle, return to your own lands. No one else needs to die. You tilt your head. Truce. He nods eagerly. We'll allow you to keep your lands north of the Thermodon. Athens will not challenge your trade routes. You step closer. So kind. Did Theseus write that himself? The boy doesn't reply. You let the moment stretch long enough to become uncomfortable. Then lean in. Tell your king. You whisper. We remember everything. The boy flees before you can add anything poetic. Back at camp, Antiope doesn't laugh. She simply nods and says, Good. Let them beg first. You fall asleep that night to the sound of drills, warriors, sharpening blades, testing bows, rehearsing formations. Ilara walks among the wounded with a bowl of honey paste, her hands moving in rhythm. Callisto strums a lyre with her feet while cleaning her arrows. The goat has eaten someone's leather sandals and is being scolded in 3 languages. Despite the chaos, there's calm. You're not rushing. You're waiting, because Antiope has a plan. One morning, you wake to find her armor painted black, not dyed painted, with a swirling spiral across her chest that marks her as death incarnate in Amazon tradition. It's only worn once in a lifetime, and never taken off until blood has answered for blood. She gathers you all in the center of camp. You stand shoulder to shoulder in silence, the wind carrying the scent of roasted barley and pine resin. Antiope speaks plainly. Theseus must fall. She doesn't shout, doesn't need to. Her voice is low and cold. A river under ice. You know what she means. Not just defeat. Humiliation. She plans to march through the gates, not as a conqueror, but as a correction. Later that day, you spot movement near the walls. Athenians practicing with their spears, unaware that scouts have mapped every angle of their formation. You watch them and wonder how many are poets, philosophers, reluctants conscripts. You wonder if they've ever been taught to fear the wrath of women denied peace. Historians debate how close the Amazons truly came to taking Athens. Some say it was a skirmish. Others argue it was the greatest military embarrassment in early Greek history. But when you stand on that ridge, looking down at the greatest city of the age, you feel something deeper than facts. You feel a moment balanced like a knife's edge where the story could go either way. And tomorrow, you push. The sun hasn't risen yet when you slip into the ravine. The air is damp and smells like soil and blood and crushed time. Your feet barely make a sound on the packed earth. Around you, shadows. Shift sisters moving in absolute silence. Blades drawn. Breath shallow. Ahead, hidden behind a tangled wall of rock and vine, is a narrow cave. Just beyond it, a hidden passage, a half-forgotten drainage tunnel built during some long-ago siege of Athens. And inside that tunnel waits a seer. You weren't told her name, only that she lives in the dark, dreams in riddles, and sees farther than even the hawks above your camp. She was once a Pythia at Delphi, or so the rumors go. Cast out when she refused to speak in Apollo's riddles and started muttering prophecy in a voice that burned her own throat. Themistoclea, Antiope called her. You don't know whether that's a title or a curse. You duck through the mouth of the tunnel. The air suddenly colder. The stone walls sweat and echo with water drops. After about a dozen steps, the tunnel widens into a chamber. The scent changes suddenly thick with myrrh and what might be burned hair. A single brazier flickers in the middle of the room, casting wild shadows, and behind it, half hidden in a pile of cloth and feathers, she sits. Themistoclea. Her hair is long and white as spider silk. Her skin is marked with ash. Her eyes milky but alive. You can feel her attention like a blade across your cheek. She says nothing. She simply raises one hand and beckons you closer You kneel. She speaks. Rivers run red. Smoke weeps from stone. The olive splits. Her voice is cracked and strange, each word landing like a stone tossed into a still pond. You glance at Antiope, who's kneeling beside you. Impassivia zivir. Themistoclea leans forward. The king of Athens dreams of white birds. He does not see the fire behind their wings. You don't know what that means. You suspect that's the point. Then she turns her eyes foggy, yet sharp directly on you. And you, she says, will kill the wrong man. Your mouth goes dry. You want to ask what she means. But Antiope places one hand on your shoulder and rises. Enough, she says. She's seen what we need. You retreat. The prophecy echoing like hooves across your thoughts. Kill the wrong man, when who you push it aside. There are too many tomorrows ahead. Right now, your bowstring needs waxing. Your horse needs water. And your city still needs shaking. By afternoon, the sun is high and angry, and you're scouting the outer walls of Athens with a small patrol. The Acropolis rises above it all, perched like a smug eagle's nest, practically daring you to storm it. Beside you, Callisto is chewing on a fig and making an annoyingly accurate impersonation of a Greek general. Oh no, she says in a shrill voice. Whatever shall we do? Women with opinions are at the gate. You snort. Your Greek accent is atrocious. I know, she says proudly. It's part of the charm. You scan the terrain. There's movement at the far gate. Greek soldiers in formation, shifting nervously. And behind them, a golden chariot drawn by white horses. Theseus, even from this distance. Do you recognize him? Broad-shouldered, gleaming in ceremonial armor. Sword, sheathed, but within reach. He dismounts and addresses his men. You can't hear the words, but you know the type of speech. Rallying, inspiring, desperately trying not to sound like fear smells. You whisper to yourself. White birds. That night, around the fire, Antiope calls a war council. She speaks softly but clearly. Tomorrow, we press the eastern gate, not to take it, but to force their hand. While they fight us there, we move from the south. A classic feint. You admire its simplicity. Il a rares à concert. And if they anticipate, Antiope looks her in the eye. Then they bleed. You spend the night prepping for war. You replace the fletching on your arrows. You rub beeswax into your bow limbs. You say a few words to your charm, the one shaped like a crescent moon. It's silly. Maybe. But you've always believed in small rituals. You can't sleep. Instead, you wander the camp and find Tisiphone sharpening her spear. She looks up. You believe her? Themistoclea. Yeah. You shrug. I believe she believes it. That's enough to worry me. Tisiphone mutters, in the hour before dawn. You mount up. Your horse is alert beneath you, her breath steaming in the cool air. You take position at the head of the feint squad, a row of 10 riders, tasked with hammering the eastern gate just long enough to draw attention. Callisto rides beside you, humming something off-key. The horn sounds. You charge. The eastern gate appears fast closer than you expected. The Athenian archers are sluggish. Arrows fly but fall short. You loose one of your own, a warning shot, and watch it arc beautifully into the stone above the gate. Then the trapdoors open. Dozens of Greek soldiers spill from a side tunnel encircling your squad with practiced speed. You curse under your breath. Too late to retreat. You raise your bow. Fire once. Twice. Hit one square in the thigh, but the others are upon you. Steel clashes. Hooves rear. Callisto is shouting something. Maybe a joke. Maybe a warning. You swing your dagger and slash through a gap in one man's armor. Blood sprays. You dodge a spear. You pivot, and you stab a man in the chest. He falls. And, as he does, you see his face, young. No helmet. No weapon drawn. Just wide brown eyes and the mouth beginning to form a question. He wasn't a soldier. Not yet. You killed the wrong man. Your breath catches. You barely parry the next blow. Retreat. Someone shouts. Fall back. You stagger toward your horse. Mount sloppily. And gallop away. Heart pounding. The city recedes behind you. But the boy's face doesn't. It sits behind your eyelids like smoke. Back at camp. Ilara cleans the cut on your arm. But your mind isn't on the sting. It's on the prophecy. And you will kill the wrong man. You did. What else will you do wrong? The boy's face follows you into the next morning like a shadow stitched to your ribs. Even the sunrise feels different redder than usual. Somehow thicker in the air. Like the sky is holding back a scream. You sit beside the stream that runs behind camp and scrub your dagger until the metal squeaks. Blood's long gone. But your grip stays tight. Like you could scrub guilt off with enough pressure. Antiope doesn't ask. She knows. She's watching from the high ridge. Cloak fluttering like a warning flag. Her eyes sweeping the land with that same old stillness. Not judging. Just seeing. You ride out just after dawn with the second patrol to recon Athens' southern edge, the long ride to the city's spine. The trade roads and farmland belt that once fed philosophers and sculptors. Now it's mostly abandoned fields and silent wagons. You pass through a grove of olive trees and find a shrine small, cracked, still burning a wick. A clay figure of Athena stares at you with blank eyes. Tisiphone nudges your shoulder. Think she's watching. Always. You mutter, I meant you. You glance at her. She's not smiling. She's waiting. I did what I had to. You say. She nods once. Then rides ahead. And you're left with the quiet clatter of hooves and the rustling of your own doubt. By midday, the patrol comes upon a convoy, 3 Greek supply carts, 2 oxen, no visible guards. It's too easy. Callisto raises her hand, and you all circle wide, closing in with bows drawn. But when you get close, you see why no one's protecting it. The carts are full of wounded. Men with bandaged legs, women with bloodied robes, children, eyes wide and silent. A trap. You circle once more, searching the trees. Nothing, just the groaning of a wheel and the soft whimper of someone trying not to cry. You approach the nearest cart and spot the Athenian crest stamped on a broken shield. One man reaches toward you with a shaking hand. Water. He whispers. You don't move. Then Ilara rides up beside you. Without a word, she dismounts and pulls a skin from her saddle. She kneels, gently lifts the man's head, and lets him drink. You follow. One by one, the patrol steps forward, not as warriors, but as women with water and bandages. You're not here to massacre the helpless. You never were, Historians still argue whether the Amazons were ruthless conquerors or disciplined campaigners. Some accounts paint them as merciless, others as paragons of battlefield code. But this moment, kneeling in the dust, pressing a cloth to someone's forehead, feels truer than any myth. Later, you ask Ilara why. She doesn't look up. Because someone else will tell this story, and I want them to get it right. By evening, you return to camp and report to Antiope. She listens, nods, then says, "Send scouts." If the wounded are being moved, the city is bracing. She's right. The long ride to Athens was a test run, a way to gauge your reach, to see how they'd respond to seeing the wolf's breath on their doorstep. And now, they're drawing tighter, curling inward like a snail into its shell. You've seen it before in other cities. The moment right before something breaks. You're summoned that night to a strategy council. The map is laid out on a cloth stretched between stones, annotated with dried blood and hastily carved symbols: Antiope, Aella, Ilara, Callisto, and 2 other commanders you don't know well. Gather in a tight circle. We attack from 2 sides tomorrow. Antiope says, western flank. Then, northern breach. What about Theseus? Callisto asks. Antiope's fingers tighten on a small carved token. He'll be watching the wrong gate. You're assigned to the northern team charged with reaching the lower slopes of the Acropolis, close enough to fire at any reinforcements, descending the steps. The path there is tight, carved between high stone and twisting olive groves. Perfect ambush territory. Perfect risk. Before dawn, you prepare. You tie your hair back with a leather thong soaked in sage oil. You rub chalk on your palms. You say nothing to anyone, but you run your fingers once, briefly, across the crescent moon charm, tucked in your belt. As you mount your horse, Tisiphone appears beside you. She holds something small in her hand, a wrapped piece of paper-thin metal. For luck, she says, or for memory. You nod. Take it. Tuck it under your chest plate. You ride out in staggered formation. 20 of you. Silent. Eyes sharp. The city grows closer. Louder with every hoofbeat. The shouts of men on walls. The clatter of carts racing through alleys. The awful, echoing call of war. Horns being blown too late to matter. You break into a gallop at the ridge. Arrows already knocked. The first volley is yours. You aim for the signal tower. 3 men silhouetted against the sun. All 3 fall before they see you. Shouts erupts. Greeks shout. Scatter. Rally. You dismount as planned, taking cover behind a ruined aqueduct, loosing arrows as fast as your fingers can move. The northern breach groans under pressure. The Amazons are storming in. Foot by foot. Shield by shield. You fire. Dodge. Fire again. Then you hear it a scream. High. Human. Familiar. You turn. Tisiphone. She's surrounded. 3 soldiers. Too close. Too fast. You drop your bow and run. The first man goes down to your dagger. The second grabs your arm, and you twist. Slam your forehead into his nose. Feel the crunch. The third turns to run, but Tisiphone catches him with her spear. You're both breathing hard. Hands shaking. She grins. Thanks. She pants. You nod. Then bend over, catching your breath. The ground beneath you is sticky with blood, not all of it Greek. She's wounded. You hadn't seen it, her sides torn. Shallow, but long. She tries to wave you off, but you press your hand to the wound. Later, she mutters, and that's all the time you get. Because the Acropolis gates are starting to open, you don't remember starting to run. 1 second. You're crouched over Tisiphone, your palm pressed to the gash along her ribs. Your own blood, boiling from the clash. The next, you're up, weapon drawn, sprinting toward the ancient white marble gates of the Acropolis, as they creak open like the mouth of a sleeping god. The Athenians are pouring out not in formation, not in discipline, but in desperation. This isn't a counterattack. This is panic. You see one soldier still buckling his armor, another fumbling to string his bow, eyes wide with disbelief that the enemy has made it this far. One man doesn't even have sandals on. It's almost funny if you weren't hurtling toward a line of spears. Antiope gives the signal. Everything breaks loose. Your sisters surge forward. A flood of leather, bronze, and snarling defiance. Hooves slam the stone. Arrows darken the sky. The Acropolis, the jewel of Athens, the home of temples and triumphs, gods and glowing marble, is no longer a pedestal. It's a battleground. You're in the thick of it, parrying, dodging, jabbing. Sweat soaking into your armor. One Athenian lunges, and you sidestep, letting his momentum carry him into your knee. He goes down with a wheeze. Another tries to grapple you, but your elbow finds his throat. Your dagger finds the gap in his chest plate. You don't think anymore. You react. The sacred steps of the Acropolis are soaked with blood and dust. You plant your foot on the lowest one. This isn't just battle now. This is symbolic warfare. Every inch you climb says the myths were wrong. We are not defeated. We are not ornaments. We are not your cautionary tales. And then, from high above, you see him? Theseus. He's standing beneath the shadow of the Parthenon, flanked by 2 guards. His hair tied back in a neat war braid. His sword drawn. No armor. Now he wears a white tunic belted with gold, like he's already planning how he'll look on a commemorative vase. He sees Antiope, and that's when the air shifts. You've felt it before, right before a lightning strike, or a stampede. The weight of inevitability settling into your bones. Antiope starts climbing. Alone. Every warrior, every Greek, every watcher just stops. You hear only her boots on the marble. She and Theseus face each other between 2 columns of the Parthenon, between wisdom and war. No audience. No messengers. Just 2 legends, separated by grief and rage, and something far more dangerous than love memory. They speak. You can't hear them. Then, like a clock reaching its final tick, they draw weapons. You watch sword flashes, cloak whips. Sun catches the edge of a blade. It's not a duel. It's a reckoning. Theseus is fast, practiced. But Antiope is something else. Her body remembers. Every block, every pivot, every counter. She's not just fighting him. She's fighting the years of silence, the rewrites, the poets who told her story like it was his. He manages to slice her thigh. She falters. He presses forward. Then she drops her blade. You gasp, but only for a moment, because with one fluid motion, she dives, grabs the hilt again mid-roll, and drives it up beneath his ribs. Silence. Theseus chokes, stumbles, and falls at her feet. You expect cheers, cries of triumph. Instead, the entire hilltop holds its breath. Antiope kneels beside him, not to gloat, not to curse, just to look, and then she closes his eyes. She turns to face you all, her face bloodied, but dry-eyed. She raises her sword once, not in victory, but in declaration. The Acropolis is yours. You have taken the sacred rock. You climb the steps now. Breath heaving, knees aching, unsure what you'll find at the top. It's quiet. The columns cast long shadows. Pigeons scatter into the wind. Inside the Parthenon, Athena's statue looms, massive and impassive, gold and ivory, perfect and indifferent. She doesn't flinch at your arrival. Of course not. The gods don't play favorites. They just watch. Tisiphone appears beside you, bloodied, but grinning. You ever think we'd get this far? You shake your head. I didn't think we'd live past Thessaly. Callisto is already carving her initials into the base of a column. Hilada Hevis, limping but alive, and sets down her satchel with a sigh. So what now, she asks. You look around. From up here, Athens is small. The streets twist like veins. The rooftops seem fragile. The mighty city that told the world who you were now waits, breathless, for who you'll become. You could sack it, burn it, crown Antiope as ruler, redraw the maps. But no one moves yet, because something sacred just shifted, and none of you are quite ready to put it into words. Historians still argue whether the Amazons truly took the Acropolis. Some say they never made it past the gates. Others insist it was just a symbolic charge, a myth born from nightmares. But the marble under your boots is warm from the sun, and you've got bruises in the shape of Athenian regrets. You're not interested in their debates. You were there. You saw the goddess blink, and you know this for one perfect afternoon. The heart of Athens beat to an Amazon rhythm. You descend the Acropolis like it's a mountain you were never meant to climb. And now, every step downward feels like some ancient warning being undone. Behind you, the columns still stand silent, dignified, and probably scandalized that a band of women tracked mud across their sacred floor. Athena's gaze remains stone, always watching, never intervening. Back in the lower city, the chaos is beginning to settle. The air is thick with smoke, not from fire, but from cracked oil lamps and burned wagons. You pass an alley where 3 Amazons are holding back a small riot, not with violence, but with the world's most intimidating stares. A merchant is on his knees, offering a bolt of purple cloth in exchange for peace. Callisto takes it. No reason for waste. Athens is confused. The people don't know if they've been conquered or spared. And frankly, you're not sure either. The banners haven't changed. No proclamations have been issued. No temple defiled. But the soldiers are gone. Theseus is dead. And Antiope now walks the streets like she's already on a coin. You regroup at a square near the agora. Antiope stands beneath a statue of Apollo and pulls off her gloves, one finger at a time, like she's peeling off a skin that no longer fits. A crowd gathers, not angry, not cheering, just watching. She speaks. We didn't come to destroy Athens, she says. We came to remember her, to remind her who she forgot. No one interrupts. We came for our sister, she says. We came for our story. And then she does something no conqueror ever does. She steps down, not up, not onto a pedestal, down, back into the crowd, back into the dirt and breath and blood and noise of the city. She hands her sword not to a general, not to a priest, but to an old woman in the front row, whose eyes well up like she just saw something worth surviving for. You hear later that Antiope offered the Athenians a pact peace in exchange for remembrance. No tributes, no taxes, just acknowledgement. A line in their history that didn't start with once upon a mistake. You return to the Amazon camp outside the city's edge that night. Exhausted. There's food flatbread with honey, boiled barley, goat cheese, that somehow made it through the skirmish, untrampled. You eat too quickly. Stomach growling, like it's been possessed by a siege demon. Someone starts playing a lyre, probably stolen. Definitely out of tune. But it makes people laugh. And laughter is the sound that finally tells you something's changed. You sit with Ilara, who's sewing up a torn cloak with the concentration of a woman defying fate itself. Tisiphone is asleep on her back, one sandal still on, the other thrown halfway across the tent. Callisto is composing a poem about the statue of Theseus wetting itself. She insists it's historical fiction. As the moon rises, you step outside the tent and stare at the city, glowing under starlight. You're too wired to sleep. So you walk the camp perimeter, watching the fires burn low. A few Amazons nod as you pass. Most are already asleep. Their dreams heavy with what could have been worse and what might still be better. You find Antiope sitting alone beneath an olive tree, tracing lines in the dirt with her dagger tip. Can't sleep either, she asks. You shake your head. You ever think it'd go like this? She smiles. But it's crooked. Not once. There's a long silence. Then she says, I loved him. You know, it's not a confession. It's a fact. Cold and strange and sharp. I know. You say, another pause. I didn't expect to kill him. She continues, not really. I thought maybe he'd change. You look up at the stars. Men don't change for us. They write poems and call it progress. Antiope chuckles softly. He always did love metaphors more than action. You sit together until the chill of night starts biting at your joints. As you stand to go, she says, you know this isn't the end. You nod. No story this loud ever ends, quietly. She looks at you for a moment, then says, tomorrow we ride. Let the city decide what it was we did. You sleep late the next morning. When you finally rise, the camp is already being packed. Tents rolled. Fire doused. Horses brushed and fed. The goat has somehow survived the battle and is wearing a laurel crown, courtesy of someone with too much time and a ribbon fetish. You help load supplies and check your weapons. As you tighten your saddle straps. You glance back toward Athens. The gates are still open. A few curious children watch from behind a cart. One of them raises a hand. Not a wave. Just a small gesture. Recognition. Maybe. You return it. The ride away from Athens is quiet. No songs. No drums. Just the soft rhythm of hooves and thoughts. Historians will say, the Amazons never stayed. That they disappeared as mysteriously as they arrived. That they came like a storm and left no roots. But you know better. You left something behind. Not a kingdom. Not a ruin. Just an idea. An hecho. In the temples, in the art, in the stories whispered under breath by girls who want more than marriage and boys who dream of following, not leading. And maybe that's enough. The road winds eastward now, past the Athenian farms and overgrown orchards, through fields where the war never quite reached, but the stories surely will. You ride slowly, letting your horse pick her path among olive stumps and dry furrows. The soil is tired, and so are you. There's no pursuit, no arrows whistling past your ear, no cities left to storm, just the long, echoing trail of a war that bent history a little sideways. By the second day, the landscape flattens. The sea appears again to your right, glittering like shattered armor under the sun. Seagulls cry overhead. Someone behind you starts singing. Not a war song, just a tune about rain, and figs, and lazy rivers. Callisto. Probably. Her voice carries on the breeze like it was never made to shout. You stop at a shallow river to water the horses. Antiope stands knee-deep in the current, washing her blade. She's cleaned it twice already today, but she keeps scrubbing anyway, as if blood can stain memory deeper than steel. Ilara offers her a fresh cloth. Antiope doesn't take it. That night, as the campfire crackles low, Ilara begins drawing in the dirt. She sketches lines and figures, explaining to a few younger Amazons how the battle unfolded, how the diversion pulled the Athenians west, how the northern flank collapsed, how the Acropolis fell not through brute force but timing and grit. You recognize yourself in one of the stick figures. You have great cheekbones in charcoal. Tisiphone is sitting beside you, bandages peeking from under her tunic. She catches your glance and mutters, "I still think we should have taken their library." You raise an eyebrow. To burn it, to borrow it, we could have replaced all their weird plays with something useful, like maps, or an illustrated guide to not underestimating women. You chuckle, but a twinge of something remains, because she's right. In a way, Athens didn't fall completely. It cracked. You shook the roots, but you didn't pull the tree down. So now the question rattles around your ribs. What happens next? The answer comes sooner than expected. You stop 2 villages later. A town with no name worth remembering. Just a dusty square and a temple with cracked columns. The locals are cautious but not hostile. They've heard whispers Amazons riding like ghosts. Swords drawn. Cities trembling behind them. They offer you food and oil. And a boy, no older than 10, draws your horse in the dirt and gives it to you like it's gold. Antiope speaks to the elders. Not as a queen or a conqueror, just a woman asking whether the town needs anything protection. Supplies. A road cleared. The oldest man, stooped and blinking in the sun, says, "What we need is to not be forgotten." That night, Antiope calls a meeting. Not just commanders this time. Everyone. She says, "We don't have to vanish." Heads turn. Some nod. Some frown. She continues, "We've lived in the edges of maps too long. In margins and rumors. What if we didn't right away? What if we stayed? Just long enough to plant something." Ilara speaks first. "A school. A forge. A place where our names aren't warnings." Tisiphone adds, "A library. With illustrations." You don't say anything yet, but your chest tightens. Not with fear. With possibility. Historians still argue whether the Amazons settled anywhere after Athens. Most claim they vanished eastward, back beyond the Thermodon, returning to legend. But a few say there were signs, graves with unfamiliar weapons, pottery with new motifs, village children with strange writing techniques and odd names that sounded half Greek, half wind. You helped build the first shelter the next morning. Nothing fancy, just timber, thatch, and a stone hearth. But the fire catches well. Smoke curls skyward, and there's something comforting in the hammering of pegs, the tightening of rope. Not conquest, not retreat, just living. A week later, a woman from a nearby town arrives, sword tucked under her arm. Says she heard there was a place here where women could be something more than wives or offerings. You nod, hand her a bowl of stew, and show her where the archery range will be. 2 days after that, 3 more arrive, then 5, then a dozen. Some are warriors. Others bring books, or goats, or stories too bitter to tell in one sitting. You build more shelters, dig a well, carve a path between the trees and the water. Someone plants herbs. Someone else paints a mural Antiope standing on the Acropolis. But taller, prouder, like her shadow stretches into every future the world once tried to deny. One night, around the fire, Callisto raises a cup of wine and says, "To what we almost did, you raise yours, and to what we still might." Antiope watches you all from a carved stone seat. She doesn't smile often, but tonight she does. It's small, but it's real. The new settlement doesn't have a name yet. Everyone calls it something different. The camp, the grove, the place where the goat lives. But it's growing. By the end of the second moon cycle, you've got 23 huts, a training circle, a communal hall, and a set of latrines that Tisiphone insists are way better than Athens ever managed. The goat, incidentally, now answers to Parthenon and tries to eat any scrolls left unattended. The forge gets built by a woman named Nika, who arrives one morning with soot on her cheeks, iron rings in her ears, and an attitude like thunder. She doesn't ask permission. She just starts building. Within days, she's making arrowheads and teaching 2 teenage girls how to temper steel, like it's sacred knowledge passed down from the gods. In a way, maybe it is. The library, of course, is Tisiphone's baby. She scavenges papyrus from nearby ruins, bribes a merchant to bring wax tablets, and even convinces Callisto to transcribe oral stories with a paintbrush and a long sigh. "Don't change the ending," she says every time. "Let the world get used to how it actually happened." As for you, you train, not just warriors, but travelers, locals, former temple girls who arrive with bruises and questions. You teach them to ride, to aim, to breathe steady. You watch their hands grow calloused and their backs grow straighter. You don't call it leadership, but that's what it is. You're becoming the kind of figure young women whisper about around fires, mysterious, sharp-eyed, impossible to beat at sparring. You find a rhythm. Mornings spent at the range, afternoons at the river, evenings by the fire. Antiope wanders less now. She seems to be here. In a way, she wasn't even in Athens. Sometimes you catch her sitting alone at dusk, gazing west, where the city of white stone once held her story hostage. But she doesn't look back with anger, just distance, like it's a place she once visited but wouldn't return to for all the gold in Delphi. One morning, a messenger arrives, a Greek, young, breathless, terrified, but bearing no weapon. He brings word, Athens wants a treaty. You gather in the communal hall. Floor swept. Air tense. The messenger unrolls a scroll with shaky hands. He reads, "The Council of Athens proposes a written agreement of peace, recognition, and mutual non-aggression." You glance at Antiope. Her expression doesn't shift. They wish to acknowledge the events at the Acropolis as a turning point in understanding Amazonian sovereignty. The messenger continues, stumbling over the words like they were too big to swallow. There's silence. Then Antiope speaks. We don't need their permission to exist. The messenger swallows. They know that now. Il aura raison. And if we accept, they send offerings. The boy says, tools, goods, and they wish to send a scholar. The air shifts. A scholar, Callisto asks, squinting. To spy. You mean? No. The boy says quickly. To learn. Tisiphone leans forward. They want to study us like we're frogs in a jar. Antiope's jaw tenses. Or they want to make sure the stories are accurate this time. That night, the camp buzzes with debate. Some want to refuse outright burn the scroll. Send the boy home with a goose feather and a bruised ego. Others argue that treaties mean recognition. And recognition means safety. You say little, but you keep turning the words over in your head. They wish to understand you. The irony burns like oil. By morning, a decision is made. You write back. You accept the offerings. You'll host the scholar on your terms. She arrives 3 days later. Not what you expect. Older than you. Younger than Antiope. No robes. No crown. Just sandals. A pack full of parchment. And eyes that never stop moving. My name is Damaris. She says, I'm here to listen. You test her first. You take her on a ride through the forest. Show her the forge. Let her spar with a girl half her size who knocks her flat. She doesn't flinch. She doesn't complain. That night, she listens to Alara's entire war story and writes down every word without changing a single one. Tisiphone remains skeptical. She's still going to change us into metaphors. Then let's give her better ones. You say, weeks pass. Damaris becomes a fixture. Not quite one of you, but no longer an outsider. She eats what you eat, sleeps where you sleep, starts helping in the herb garden. One evening, she watches Antiope train and mutters, no wonder Theseus fell. Callisto overhears and howls, laughing for 5 solid minutes. Eventually, Damaris shares her notes. She's writing a record. Not a poem. Not a play. A chronicle. Let the world argue, she says, but let them argue with facts. She includes maps, names, dates. She includes the story of the boy you killed by accident. You almost ask her to remove it, but you don't, because truth matters now. And one afternoon, Damaris asks if she can write your name, not just your title, your name. You tell her yes. Historians still argue whether that early chronicle was real. Some say it was forged centuries later by someone trying to spice up women's history. Others say the style is too modern, the facts too sharp. But you remember the ink on your skin, as Damaris wrote. And you know better. The world doesn't always believe in women who write their own myths. But you did. The seasons shift like breath slow, inevitable, and full of meaning only if you're paying attention. By the time the first frost curls around the forge and the leaves crisp into copper, the camp no longer feels like a temporary outpost. It's a village now, a rhythm, a pulse, a place where shoes are left outside doors and children know better than to touch anyone's spear without asking. You wake before dawn most days, not because you have to, but because your body has learned to seek silence before the day crowds in. You stretch beneath a sky that's just starting to pale and walk past the library, the new training grounds, the hut, where Damaris is probably already scribbling down dreams someone whispered to her last night. She claims dreams are as worthy as history. You're starting to believe her. The young ones train hard now. There's a girl named Celine who can already hit a rabbit mid-hop and swears she'll outrun a horse by spring. You teach her to brace her legs better when she draws. And she tells you, you're too old to understand speed. You're 27. You feel 90. One evening, you gather around the long fire pit and share stories from before. Before Athens. Before Amazon. Some came from fishing villages. Some from mountain farms. One woman used to be a priestess until she asked too many questions. Another was married off at 12 and ran away at 13. She carries her old wedding ring on a cord around her ankle, not as a keepsake, but as a weight she never wants to forget. Antiope rarely tells her own stories. But when she does, the fire gets keyeder. One night she speaks of Thermodon, not the river, but the place beyond it, where the old queens rode, where the stars reflected so brightly in the water that it felt like the gods lived beneath, not above. You remember it, you ask her once. She nods. But sometimes I wonder if I dreamed it into being. The truth is, no one misses Athens. Not really. The stone was beautiful, but cold, the air too thick with rules. Here, things grow, people change, and yet, even as you plant new seeds, the past keeps poking through the soil. One day, a man arrives at the edge of the settlement, alone, hands raised, not a threat. He says he's the brother of the boy you killed outside the eastern gate. You're there when he arrives. You recognize the shape of his face, the way his eyes hold something unfinished. The camp stiffens, bows twitch, but Antiope raises a hand and says, "Let him speak." He carries a single scroll, written in a neat, firm hand. He reads from it, "I do not come for vengeance," he says, "only for understanding." You don't breathe. I want to know why he died. I want to know what happened that day. I want to understand the war we were told not to question. He's trembling, but not with anger, with something far quieter, grief without blame. Later, you sit with him beside the fire. You don't speak right away. Just let the silence be soft for once. When you do speak, your voice surprises you. "I didn't mean to kill him. I thought he was drawing a weapon. I didn't see until it was too late." He nods. He wasn't even supposed to be there. He says, he was delivering bandages. He wanted to become a sculptor. You tell him about the boy's last breath, about how his eyes didn't look scared, just surprised, like he'd forgotten he was mortal. You don't apologize. Not because you aren't sorry, but because you know no words can do what silence already did. The man leaves the next morning. He doesn't look back. You don't know if he'll forgive you. You only know he'll remember you as you are. not as a line in someone else's epic. The world keeps nudging against your peace. A month later, a group of Athenian traders arrive with goods and news. They bring wine, salt, a goat with absurdly curly horns, and word that Sparta has heard of your village. They want to meet. The trader says, "They're curious." Antiope raises an eyebrow. Sparta is never curious. They're calculating. Ilara mutters. They're also fond of punching first and introducing themselves later. You hold a meeting. For the first time, the entire village votes. A mix of old warriors and new settlers, dreamers and bruised exiles. In the end, it's agreed. A delegation will go. You're chosen to lead it. You travel south with 4 others: Callisto, Ilara, Tisiphone, and Damaris, because of course she insists on coming. You ride through forests blooming with winter brittle thistle, and across plains where the wind tries to lift you from your saddle. You reach Sparta in 5 days. It is not like Athens. Sparta is muscle and geometry. Everything sharp angles, square temples, and men with expressions like they're constantly chewing gravel. But they receive you with stiff respect. No weapons drawn. No sneers. One of them even bows so low, you think he might be stuck. The Spartan queen, Archidamia, is younger than you expected, stern, curious, still blood on her boots. You took the Acropolis, she says, and then walked away. We weren't there to steal a city. You reply, just a story. She narrows her eyes. And now you're writing your own. You nod. She studies you. You'll need allies. Peace is only safe when someone's ready to keep it. Tisiphone coughs. That's our specialty. You stay for 3 nights. There are debates, sparring matches, a shared meal where someone nearly chokes on boiled eel. Damaris insists on recording everything, including the eel. When you finally ride home, Archidamia hands you a scroll marked with her seal, an agreement. She says, trade, respect, protection. You blink. From what? She doesn't answer. Just watches you ride away. When you return, the village throws a feast. The goat is involved. Someone bakes honey cakes shaped like helmets. You eat until your stomach protests. Then watch the stars until your eyes sting. And later, lying on your back beside the river, you realize something. You didn't just survive history. You changed it. The scroll from Sparta sits on Antiope's table for 3 days before she opens it. Not because she's avoiding it, more like she wants to let the weight of it sink in first. Treaties, after all, are rarely just ink. They're trust, wrapped in warnings, tied up in consequences, and in this case, a Spartan seal that still smells faintly of goat tallow. When she does break it open, she reads it out loud, beneath the olive tree, where Damaris is sketching something, and Parthenon the goat is chewing on someone's sandal strap. The terms are clear: a promise of trade routes, a defensive pact, and the occasional cultural exchange, which likely means a parade of confused Spartan youths coming to marvel at your village and mispronounce your names. Ilara listens with arms crossed. Cultural exchange, she mutters. That sounds suspiciously like accidental spying. Izixtu. Callisto grins. Then we'll send them home with poems about how we braid our horses' tails for war rituals. Let them start a whole trend. The treaty is signed, sealed, and sent back. You ride out to deliver it yourself, with 2 others, and a bundle of fresh arrowheads as a goodwill gift. You don't stay long. The Spartans are civil but stiffer than old cheese. Still, a pact is a pact, and for the first time in months, you feel something new coiling in your chest, safety. Not the fragile kind, not the silence before the storm kind, but the kind that builds foundations. When you return, your village is preparing for its first winter festival. Tisiphone, naturally, declares herself minister of fire and nonsense, and immediately commissions a giant bonfire sculpture shaped like Athena's owl wearing a crown. It's horrifying. It's perfect. Callisto paints faces with streaks of ash and hands out toasted almonds. Damaris reads new poetry under the stars. And you, well, you light the first flame. The villagers cheer. Drums pound. And for a moment, everything is warmth. That night, Antiope finds you sitting on the hill that overlooks the river. She doesn't sit, just stands beside you, arms wrapped around herself. You ever think this would work? She asks. You glance at the lights flickering through the trees below. No, but I think it is. She nods. I've been dreaming again. She says, not of war, of the river, the one past Thermodon. You miss it every day, she says, but I'd rather miss it than forget it. There's a long pause. Then she says, I'm stepping down. You blink? What? As leader, general, queen. Pick your title. I'm done with all of them. She looks at you, steady and quiet. I think you know who should take it. You laugh once, out of shock. Not me. She raises an eyebrow. You've trained half this village. You've negotiated with Sparta. You speak less than you need to, and more when it matters. You carry their respect like it's always been there. You start to protest, but she cuts you off. I'm not asking you to be me. I'm asking you to be you. But louder. The next day, she makes the announcement. There's no crown, no ceremony, just Antiope standing in the central circle, with the wind in her hair and the firelight in her eyes. I'm not leaving, she says, but it's time for someone else to lead. She looks at you, and suddenly, everyone else does too. You step forward. Slow. Heart hammering like it's trying to make a break for it. You don't say anything right away. Just let the silence stretch long enough to mean something. Then you speak. I didn't come here to rule. I came here to escape being ruled. A murmur of laughter. But someone has to speak for us. For what we're building. For what we've lost and what we refuse to lose again. You meet every eye you can. If you'll have me, I'll speak. I'll guide. I'll guard. Ilara nods. Tisiphone gives you a thumbs up. Callisto whistles like you just won a chariot race. And Antiope, she smiles. Not just with her mouth. With everything. The first few days of leadership are awkward. People keep bowing. You tell them to stop. They don't. There are disputes to settle. Scouts to organize. Supply chains to double-check before snow thickens the roads. You meet with elders. With newcomers. With the women training to be future commanders. You speak less than Antiope did. But when you do, people listen. You plant a tree in the center of the camp. A fig tree. You tell Damaris it's for shade. But really, it's for permanence. Something rooted. Something that can't ride away. One evening, Callisto finds you sorting through letters from other settlements. A village in Boeotia wants to ally. A coastal town wants help teaching its girls to fight. A group of former slaves has set up their own camp near Delphi and wants to trade. Did you ever think we'd become, I don't know, a movement? Callisto asks, plucking an almond from your desk. You shrug. I thought we'd survive. That felt like enough. She grins. Now we're thriving. Next thing you know, they'll be putting us on coins. You shake your head. Let them put us in books first. Proper ones. Tisiphone bursts in holding a scroll. Speaking of books, Damaris finished the first full chronicle. She unrolls it across your table. Ink still drying. Pages filled with names. Dates. Sketches. Records. Your name. Your actions. Not cleaned up. Not romanticized. Just told. She's going to copy it. Tisiphone says. Send it to Alexandria. Maybe even Rome. You run your fingers over the parchment. Let them read. Let them argue. Let them wonder. Let them remember. The winter comes in slow and heavy. Like a bear settling over the hills. The wind whistles between the trees with a sharper voice now. The kind that gets into your teeth if you don't wrap your scarf high enough. But the camp is ready. You've spent weeks preparing stocking grain. Waterproofing roofs. Mending boots until your fingers ache. This time, you don't fear the season. You've grown into it. Your new role has not made you softer. If anything, it's sharpened the corners of you. People come to you with questions now, and expect answers that won't wobble in the wind. You give them, not always quickly, not always easily, but they trust you. And that's worth more than gold or spear tips. One evening, as snow begins to lace the rooftops with white, you gather the village for something new, a night of remembrance. Not a funeral, not a festival, something quiet, honest. You sit in a wide circle around a fire that burns low and blue, and everyone shares the name of someone they've lost. Not just in battle, though, there are plenty of those, but before. A sister, a child, a dream that didn't live long enough to be named. You say the boy's name, out loud, for the first time. Nobody interrupts. Nobody flinches. Damaris, in the corner, simply closes her notebook and lets silence be the page. Tisiphone eventually breaks it. Because, of course she does. I had a dog once, she says. Voice soft. She was mean and flatulent, and loved my boots more than my face. A ripple of laughter. Then, more stories. More faces. More light. The fire warms your knees, and something deeper in your ribs. The snow doesn't fall heavy this year. Just enough to dust the earth and force everyone to walk slower. You spend more time indoors. The forge glows brighter than usual. The library now has a second room, filled with scrolls from other settlements. And one wall, just for drawings, portraits, diagrams, and one extremely unflattering doodle of you in mid-yawn. Callisto's work. Obviously. You host more visitors than ever. People come from places you've never heard of. Mountain towns. Coastal villages. Even a few quiet souls from Athens, arriving in cloaks with eyes like secrets. They bring offerings, goats, silk, songs. One woman gifts you a set of wooden carvings shaped like warriors dancing. My grandmother swore she saw you ride past her orchard. She says she wasn't scared. She just said, Finally. Oh, you make space for them. Not all stay. Some come to look, to learn, to carry stories home like stones in a pouch. Others stay longer. A potter who makes bowls with swirling Amazon motifs. A healer who teaches Tisiphone how to grind herbs for pain instead of sarcasm. A child who has never spoken, but begins humming when the forge bellows. The village grows. You establish watch rotations, training schedules, even a shared childcare roster. It's chaos, but functional chaos. You formalize your agreements with Sparta, Boeotia, and Delphi. You write your own rules, not in stone, but in scrolls stored beneath the fig tree. You name your community. You call it Eleuthera, freedom. Historians will argue about that name. They'll say it's too poetic, too convenient. They'll question whether it was really founded by Amazons or merely inspired by them. They'll try to separate the myth from the dirt under your nails. Let them try, because Eleuthera stands, and every stone in its walls remembers you. One icy morning, you wake before dawn and find Antiope waiting at the river. She's wearing travel gear. Her horse is saddled. There's no goodbye in her eyes, just recognition. You're really leaving, you ask. I have to, she replies. There are others out there, girls who need to know we existed. Stories that haven't heard us yet. You nod. I left you something, she says, and hands you a pouch. Inside is a small, flat disc, an Amazon seal, etched with a crescent and a bow. Not for power, for memory. I don't expect statues, she says, but I want us to be impossible to forget. You watch her ride off into the pale blue fog, cloak trailing behind her like the last page of a story not yet told. The seasons turn again. Spring comes like a shout. Crocuses split the frost. Birds return in rude, noisy clusters. The forge sings again. The children outgrow their boots too fast. Damaris publishes her second chronicle, The Echo Beyond Athens. It spreads, slowly, but surely. One day, you receive a scroll sealed in crimson wax. It's from a scholar in Rome. He wants to visit, to compare truth with legend. You grin. Let him. You say, another visitor. Another story. Another ripple in the world's idea of what's possible. Later, you walk to the fig tree. Sit beneath it. Feel the sun on your arms. Watch the young warriors spar in the clearing. They're faster than you were. Bolder. They make up songs while they fight, and laugh when they fall. One of them catches your eye and calls out, "You joining us?" You smile. Not today, but soon, because your fight isn't over. It's just changed. The summer in Eleuthera arrives like a festival parade that forgot to be subtle. Heat hums off the stone paths. The fig tree you planted 2 years ago is now tall enough to shade 3 children and 1 very lazy goat. Market stalls overflow, with everything from salted fish to dyed tunics stitched with spiral Amazon motifs. You can hardly believe this was once a clearing with tents and a goat named Parthenon who couldn't be trusted near scrolls. You're in the middle of a meeting with the village council when a scout bursts in, panting and wide-eyed, blurting out, "Visitors from beyond Corinth." That catches everyone's attention. You've had traders, cholas, even cautious Athenian diplomats. But beyond Corinth, that means Far East territories, borderlands, Wild pockets of people who still believe the Amazons are more rumor than fact. You rise, dust off your knees, and motion for the scout to lead the way. They arrive at dusk, 5 of them, dressed in leathers, unfamiliar to your eye. Cloaks dyed in deep ochres and blacks. They speak slowly, carefully, with a rhythm that sounds like wind over flat plains. Their leader, a woman named Arya, bows in the old way, left knee down, hand over heart. "You're the one who led them," she says. You tilt your head. "Led who?" "The ones who reminded us we existed." She opens a satchel and removes a worn scroll. Dimri's first chronicle. They'd read it. Far away, across mountains. It had traveled faster than you knew. "We want to join you," Arya says, "but we don't want to disappear in the process." You know what she means. You've seen it before. Settlers who come to blend and lose themselves in the fold. But Arya's people want space, not erasure. So you offer them land west of the main village, past the training fields and near the river bend where lavender grows wild. You help them build their first home. Watch their customs unfold, a way of marking time with shells, a system of silent hand signals for battle, songs sung not in harmony, but in fierce unison. In exchange, they share stories you've never heard. Of women who rode chariots pulled by wolves, of queens who built fortresses beneath the ground. One of their children draws a picture of you on the Acropolis, but with flames for hair and a crown made of broken arrows. You hang it beside the library's map of Eleuthera. Both are true. Callisto begins working on a mural, a massive, winding depiction of the Amazon March from Thermodon to Athens. Then outward again. It wraps around the communal hall like a ribbon of memory. Each figure she paints, she names. No one is anonymous, not even the goat. Sparta sends a representative again. This time not a soldier, but a woman in ceremonial robes named Theodora. She brings grain, armor samples, and a request: teach us your way of training, your discipline, your philosophy. Ilara offers to go. "I've taught everyone here twice over," she says. Time for someone else to yell at a Spartan for once. You let her lead a delegation, 6 fighters, 2 instructors, and a cart of practice bows. When she leaves, the village feels just a little off balance, like a stool with one leg shorter. You realize you've come to rely on her presence in ways you hadn't named. Meanwhile, Damaris finishes her 3rd chronicle, The Fire That Stayed. This one is more reflective, less battle-heavy. It tells of festivals, small griefs, arguments over library organization. A chapter is dedicated to the first Eleutheran child born under your leadership, a girl named Eleni, who holds her wooden sword like it's part of her arm. Historians still argue whether Eleuthera was ever a real place. Some say it was a metaphor, a story used to describe hope after war. Others say no settlement could have grown so fast, lasted so long, left so few ruins. But Damaris's writing circulates. Her scrolls reach places even your writers haven't. And whether the world believes or not, people keep arriving. They keep finding you. One day, a man shows up at the gates, not armed, not hostile, just tentative. You meet him yourself. He carries a bundle of scrolls and says, "My sister was one of you." I didn't believe her, not at first. But now, you welcome him, assign him a hut near the orchard. He asks if men are allowed to train. Of course, you say. If they listen, he listens. The next week, a woman from Crete arrives with clay tablets. Then 2 girls from Macedonia, walking barefoot and grinning. Then a whole family from a nameless coastal town that whispers of the Amazon queen who brought fire but not chains. You realize something. Eleuthera isn't just a place anymore. It's a direction. One evening, Antiope returns. No fanfare. No trumpet, just a rider in the dusk. Saddle dusty. Hair tied back. You recognize her silhouette before she dismounts. She's older now. You all are. But her eyes still burn. I missed you, she says. You hug her like a sister who never quite left your chest. She sits at the fire that night, listening to the newcomers share tales of the road. Eventually, they ask her a question you've heard before. Were you really the one who took the Acropolis? She smiles, slow and sharp. No, she says. We took it. And she looks at you. That night, you walk together under the stars. Just like you used to. You've done well, she says. You nod. We've done something. She stops walking. There's talk of a gathering, she says. Not just settlements visiting. A true council. A place where those like us can share knowledge. Shape what comes next. You glance up at the stars. Where? Here. You exhale. Of course. Because it always begins again. The preparations for the council begin long before you call it a council. At first, it's just the idea of gathering. A simple notion passed over shared bread. Whispered on horseback. Carried in the folds of a scout's cloak. You write to Sparta. To Boeotia. To the Delphi settlements. To the newcomers who've built sanctuaries in the mountains and forests. Even to hesitant enclaves near what used to be Thebes. You don't ask them to pledge loyalty. You ask them to show up. The invitations go out by rider, by ship, by rumor, and the rumors travel faster than the scrolls. Some say Eleuthera is building an army. Others say you're forging an alliance of queens. A few whisper you've uncovered ancient magic that makes women immortal. You don't correct any of it. Let the myths do their work. The date is set for the full moon. 3 moons from now, you begin transforming the old training field into a gathering place. Trees are cleared, not many. Just enough for a wide circle and paths between tents. Callisto designs a banner for the event, 2 bows crossed beneath a torch, framed by stars. Tisiphone insists on calling it the Great Gathering of the Flaming Goat. You veto that, as the moon begins to swell. They start to arrive. First in pairs, then in clusters, then in droves. Women on horseback, cloaked figures with walking staffs. Entire contingents wearing matching dyed tunics. Some carry shields. Some carry scrolls. A few carry nothing but stories etched into the lines of their palms. They come from everywhere. From places you've only ever seen drawn in chalk on Damaris's maps. By the time the sun rises on the first day of the gathering, there are over 300 people in Eleuthera. And not just women, fathers who fled when their daughters were taken, sons raised on the rhythm of drum and fire, scholars, midwives, horse breeders, poots. The forge fires burn all night to keep pace with repairs and requests. The baker nearly collapses making flatbread. The goat has a minor panic and hides in the communal well. But the energy is electric. You open the council, not with a speech, but with a question. What do we need to become more than a rumor? There's silence. Then, slowly, Answers. We need maps. We need defenses. We need to teach. Not just train. We need a language. That last one comes from a girl no older than 13. Sitting cross-legged near the fire. She explains, when people from different regions come together, they struggle to speak. They rely on gestures, misunderstand words. Miss Nuance. She wants to build a new tongue blended. Borrowed. Beautiful. You give her your blessing. You don't even ask her name. You'll learn it in time. The days unfold with fire and purpose. Groups form organically, some to trade, some to debate. Damaris sets up a storytelling tent, where elders spin oral histories and young ones sketch their shapes on tablets. The Spartans host an athletic exhibition. A group from Thrace presents a new sling design. A woman from Lesbos shares songs so haunting that even the goats pause to listen. You convene the main council each night. Beneath the fig tree, surrounded by torches that crackle with wind and memory. You don't dictate. You ask. You listen. And slowly, the threads begin to weave. A shared code of respect, not law. Not command. But promise, a system for sending envoys between settlements. A sanctuary protocol, ensuring that anyone fleeing oppression has a place to land. A signal fire network, 3 short bursts. 1. Long to warn of invasion or disaster. And finally, a declaration, not a kingdom, not an empire. A sisterhood of places, bound by fire. Not borders. They ask what it should be called. You don't speak. Antiope does. Let it remain Eleuthera. Not just the name of your village now, but the idea that grew from it, the direction you all move toward. The word that means more than escape, it means choosing. That night, the celebration begins, the largest you've ever seen. Bonfires, dancing, laughter that climbs trees and echoes down the hills. Food from every region. Drink that would make Dionysus weep. A group of Macedonians perform a dance with clacking sticks and wild howls. Tisiphone responds by choreographing an interpretive routine involving 4 cloaks and a stolen helmet. She receives thunderous applause. You spend the night walking through the crowd, sharing stories, hugging people you barely know, learning names, hearing lives. Someone from an island far to the east tells you, "We thought we were the only ones." You shake your head. None of us were ever alone. We just hadn't found each other yet. The council lasts a full week. On the final day, you gather everyone in the great circle. One last time. No grand speeches. Just one truth. Remember this. You say, not because it was perfect, not because it will last forever, but because it happened, because we chose it. They leave slowly, with promises and scrolls and bundles of bread. You watch the caravans disappear over the horizon. You don't feel loss. You feel weight. The good kind. The kind that means something has roots now. You find Antiope back at the fig tree, carving a symbol into the bark, 2 lines crossing a spiral. What's that, you ask? Us, she says. And how we kept going. The winds of late summer carry a hush over Eleuthera. Like the land itself is exhaling after all the voices have gone quiet. The last embers of the council fires are cold now, buried under a scattering of olive leaves and discarded ribbons. But the memory of what took place here, of words exchanged, and futures declared, still buzzes in the air like the faint hum of bees after the hive has calmed. You rise early again, but not to meet a scout or resolve a conflict, just to walk, through the grove where the young girls train now in pairs, perfecting forms you remember struggling with yourself, through the marketplace, where new stalls have popped up, offering carved figurines of the bow and torch emblem, along with herbal teas that Tisiphone swears are medicinal and only slightly hallucinogenic, through the eastern quarter, where Arya's people have built a circular garden that follows the phases of the moon. Damaris is in the library, binding the final copy of her 4th chronicle. She's thinner now, her eyes more tired, but there's a light behind them that wasn't there before. You glance at her pages as she works illustrations, passages, maps, even scraps of overheard conversations. Collected like jewels, you spot a quote from you. Let them write what they want. We'll live what we mean. She looks up. I'm nearly done. You smile. You never will be. No, she says, dipping her kill. But it's a lovely illusion. Outside, the children play a game in the dust, reenacting the storming of the Acropolis with sticks and much dramatic feinting. One yells, "You'll never silence Eleuthera," before tumbling dramatically into a bush. Another yells, "We demand better sandals," which may or may not be historically accurate. The forge rings out with Nika's hammer as she trains her new apprentice, a boy who used to flinch at loud noises, but now bellows over molten metal like a thunder god. You pass him a water jug, and he grins, soot smearing his teeth. You pass the training field where Selene, yes, that Selene is now leading morning drills. She spots you, salutes with a grin, then turns back to correct someone's elbow position. Don't bend it like you're cradling a fruit basket. She yells, "This is war, not produce shopping." A messenger arrives from the west. Delphi is sending a delegation to learn your garden rotation techniques. Sparta requests another scroll copy of your sanctuary code. There's even a formal request from Alexandria for Damaris to lecture on what exactly. They aren't sure, but they've promised papyrus and pastries. The world is shifting, slowly, unevenly, but unmistakably. Historians will say it was the natural evolution of culture. That trade, necessity, and political pressures gave rise to a new model of shared female leadership. Some will claim it was a coincidence that so many settlements with similar philosophies bloomed at once. Others, more cynical, will say the whole thing was a reaction to male incompetence. But there will always be the ones who know better, the ones who remember you. You didn't do this with armies or gold. You did it with fire and listening, with rage shaped into resilience, with stories carried like seeds, scattered into winds that didn't know what they were catching. On the eve of the new moon, you climb the hill where it all began, the place you first sat across from Antiope and wondered what kind of world you were walking into. You sit there again now, older, but not hardened, just seasoned, like good leather. Or the flatbread Callisto accidentally left buried in the coals last week and called an experiment in density. Antiope joins you near sunset. No words this time, just her presence beside yours. The way it's always been equal, steady, unspoken. After a long silence, she says, "We could have died a dozen times over." You nod. And yet, we kept waking up. She chuckles. That's the real rebellion, isn't it? Below you, the lights of Eleuthera flicker into life. Lanterns, swaying in doorways. Torches glowing near the training circle. Someone sings off-key. Children chase each other with sticks. The goat tries to eat a banner again. You sit there together, watching the night draw its veil over everything you built. It is not perfect, but it is yours. And tomorrow will arrive, not as a threat, but as a continuation. So now, as the fire dwindles and the last echoes of Amazon footsteps settle into the soil, you can let yourself soften. You've ridden through myth and marched across memory, seen legends sharpen into real lives, full of chipped blades and quiet laughter. Let the dust of Eleuthera settle gently on your thoughts now. Let your breath slow like the river that traces its edge. Winding between what was and what still might be, feel the cool air of dusk drift over your shoulders. Picture the fig tree's branches rustling softly, the sound of evening crickets weaving through the warm stillness. Somewhere, a forge sighs into silence, and a child giggles over a tale they'll retell 100 different ways before they're grown. The story doesn't end here. It never did. It merely turns its face toward a quieter chapter. One with fewer battles and more planting. One where myths fade into truth, and truth finds a place to rest. You are no longer chasing the storm. You are the calm that followed it. And just like that, the campfire dims to embers. The scrolls close. The hoofprints fade. But the heartbeat of what was built, of what was fought for, thuds gently on, steady beneath the earth. Always remembered. Always rising again. So, let your eyes drift shut. Let the stars of Eleuthera light your dreams. You're safe here, among warriors and words and women who will never be forgotten. Good night. Flamebringer, you did well. Sweet dreams.